Welcome and thanks for joining us here in the KRQE studios in downtown Albuquerque for this News 13 election special. I'm Dean Staley.
And I'm Jessica Gaudete, and we are your local election headquarters.
We will be joined this evening by Senator Martin Heinrich and Nella Domenici, who are vying for New Mexico's U.S. Senate seat. They sat down with News 13 for in-depth conversations about where they stand on the issues that New Mexicans care about most. The sit-down interviews are unedited. Both of them covered a wide range of topics and covered about 25 minutes each.
First, a look at how this U.S. Senate race is shaping up. The balance of power on Capitol Hill is at stake in this election, and New Mexico will have a say in the outcome. With the majorities in the House and Senate razor thin, Senate seats have never been more important to both parties. Republicans in the House have a 5-seat majority and Democrats in the Senate holding on by only 2 seats. One of the races that will shape that balance of power is our Senate race, a seat that has been held by a Democrat for more than 40 years. Current Senator Martin Heinrich is looking to win a 3rd term, while Nella Domenici is hoping to follow in her father's steps, U.S. Senator Pete Domenici.
Nella hadn't lived in New Mexico since 1973, back when Richard Nixon was president. She'd been living in a waterfront mansion in Connecticut.
Martin Heinrich, where is he?
What has he done for New Mexico? I don't see anything.
It's a race that has turned ugly and expensive. An Emerson College and the Hill poll from a month ago shows Senator Martin Heinrich with a 12-point lead.
Right where I would expect this race to be when we finish things out. I mean, Senator Heinrich has the name recognition, he's got the credibility, his record is nearly spotless in terms of legislative, so he's not vulnerable in any stretch of the imagination.
The poll also showing New Mexicans are most concerned with crime and the economy. The current inflation rate in the U.S. is 2.9%. Unemployment stands at 4.3%, with families wondering where we are heading next. More than 53% of New Mexicans told pollsters they feel less safe than they did 5 years ago in the state. And you can expect another fight in Congress over what to do at the border. Plus, how they'll find balance protecting oil and gas in the state while moving toward renewable energy, such as solar. Tonight, their plans to address the issues. Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich has held the Senate seat since 2013, but his career in politics started decades ago as a city councilor. Martin Heinrich was born in Nevada. He graduated from the University of Missouri and became a mechanical engineer at Kirtland Air Force Base.
No one outworked my dad. As a lineman, he'd go out and battle the wind and the rain to restore the power. I see that same work ethic all across New Mexico.
The Democrat entered politics in 2003 as a member of the Albuquerque City Council. He moved on to Congress, serving in the U.S. House of Representatives for 4 years. In 2013, he replaced longtime Senator Jeff Bingaman, who retired. Heinrich has been married for 27 years and has 2 children.
Senator, very glad to have you here, and I thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
We appreciate it.
You bet.
I want to start right off with one of the issues that voters and our viewers tell us are most important to them, and that's inflation.
Sure.
2 years ago, inflation was at 9%, a crazy number. It's come down recently to under 3%. I know the Fed is talking about lowering the borrowing rate, and they may continue to do that.
Which would be hugely helpful.
Depending on circumstances. But there are still New Mexicans who say, I have trouble paying rent. I have trouble paying for groceries. Your thoughts?
One, I'm really proud of the work that we did in the Inflation Reduction Act to bring down costs, especially in the energy sector and as well as prescription drugs. I mean, we finally gave Medicare the ability to negotiate for cheaper drug costs for seniors, which was a big inflationary, like something that New Mexicans feel very viscerally is prescription drug costs. I think as a nation, we saw our supply chains broken, and we saw the impact of inflation on that. And that was a worldwide phenomenon. A lot of countries have not been able to manage it back down to 2 or 3%. They're still sitting in the very high single digits. But I think it was a lesson for us that we need to build things here, especially mission critical things, because that's how we ended up with such outrageous inflation. And so we passed things like the Chips and Science Act, saying we're not going to leave it to other countries to make these chips. We need to be able to make them here so that car prices don't explode the way that they did. And now we're seeing Intel at Rio Rancho make major investments because of that policy.
Briefly, if you would, talk to me about groceries and talk to me about housing. These are things that are hammering people in New Mexico right now.
With respect to housing, I mean, the real answer is we need to build more housing, and we need zoning reform so that it's easier to, for example, add additional quarters on single-family residential lots. Those are the only things that are going to bring down those prices. With respect to groceries, I mean, what we've seen is a lot of what's called shrinkflation, which is profit taking, and there needs to be some oversight on that. That's when you have a bag of Oreos and suddenly you have the same price, but you only get 2/3 as many Oreos.
Tell me what you think about the minimum wage, the federal minimum. We're talking about just over $7 right now.
It's terribly out of date. I mean, I raised the minimum wage when I was on the city council, for goodness sakes. And that was about the last time the federal government raised the minimum wage. It's become very mired in partisan politics, and it takes 60 votes to raise the minimum wage. And there's, to my knowledge, there aren't any Republicans standing up and raising their hand and saying, we need to do this. I think it's one of the reasons why we need to reform the filibuster. It's too easy to say no to things right now in Washington, D.C. You can sit in your office and say, I object to raising the minimum wage, and you don't even have to go to the floor and argue against it. There needs to be skin in the game from all of us with respect to those kinds of policies.
Mr. Heinrich, you've been a senator for 12 years. Your opponent in this race says you've been absent from New Mexico and that you haven't done enough for people, working people in New Mexico, in terms of the things that are most immediate to them. Your response?
I'm here every weekend. My family's here. My wife works in Santa Fe. My oldest goes to UNM. I'm constantly in New Mexico. And the work that I've done is to literally double the budget and the direct jobs at our national labs to work on projects that put New Mexicans to work. You know, you take the SunZia project, that's a $20 billion impact to the Southwest, and it means that linemen, union linemen from across New Mexico can find jobs building that infrastructure. We passed the infrastructure bill that is investing in things like broadband, and so right now, if you're in the skilled trades, it's a good time to be a New Mexican because of the investments in real solid infrastructure that is growing jobs in our state.
Thing you're most proud of from your time in the Senate?
The thing I'm most proud of is passing probably the PACT Act, which gave veterans the ability to get coverage for all of the toxic exposures in Iraq, Afghanistan, people who worked next to burn pits for years. Those people are covered by the VA now. They weren't before, and I'm very proud of that.
I want to shift the discussion now to abortion. We have the overturning by the Supreme Court of Roe v. Wade. This is an issue that matters to people all across the country, women across the country and here in New Mexico.
Republicans said they'd never do that.
In the interest of clarity, your position on abortion rights?
I think we leave it up to women, and it's a decision that should be made between individuals and their health care providers.
And I want to be comprehensive here. In vitro fertilization has been part of this discussion as well. It's one of the few ways that some New Mexicans conceive.
Right.
It's a real gift in that sense, but we
Sure
also
is.
know that it destroys embryos. Your position on IVF?
I support IVF, and I actually think we should codify access to IVF and access to contraception. Some of the things that we've heard from at least one of the Supreme Court justices suggest that they could roll that access back the way they did with abortion access through Dobbs. I think we should codify both of those things.
Your opponent, Nella Domenici, in this race says that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. This is something I think we've heard before. And she says she opposes a federal ban on abortion. Is it fair to say that your position is not far off from Ms. Domenici?
No, I think we have very different positions. She attacked me when I supported a national effort to codify Roe v. Wade. I think that if you elect Nella Domenici to the Senate will be Republican, and they have an agenda for a national abortion ban. So in effect, what you're doing is facilitating a step towards that national abortion ban.
But her official position is that
Irrespective of what her decision is, the folks who are going to be the majority leader in the next Senate have all said, we're going to do this.
Let me be more direct about this. A woman voter in New Mexico, hearing both your positions, they don't sound far apart. And there may be people who say, well, I'd just as soon vote for her.
Look at what I do, not what I say. I mean, if you look at, there's a great New Mexico saying that translated is, tell me who you hang around with and I'll tell you who you are. And all of the folks bankrolling her campaign have been committed to this national abortion ban that is laid out in great detail in Project 2025.
I want to shift our attention now to the border.
Great.
You've been a senator for 12 years now. You're seeking a third term. This country is awash in fentanyl. Fentanyl is everywhere. Not only is it everywhere, but it's so cheap.
It's cheap. It
tells you something about the supply, that we're not having an effect on the supply. We have illegal immigration in this country that many people think is just unsustainable, especially for cities and people trying to take in these folks. Would you agree that we don't have control of the border?
I think our asylum system, which is what this current wave of immigrants, what it's created, it is deeply broken, and that we need to reform that. And we had a very good proposal on the floor, negotiated with both sides, with some of the most conservative Republican colleagues of mine, that would have gotten a handle on the asylum system. And Donald Trump told Republican senators to walk away from that deal because he'd rather have an issue for the election than to solve problems. I think we should solve problems. I've been at the table 3 times now for real substantive immigration reform, which includes making the documented legal immigration easier and making it harder to abuse the asylum system that the cartels have gotten very good at abusing. We need to do that.
Could you tell me, because there is talk about the negotiated deal, and we had some honest people on both sides making compromises and coming to the middle. Tell us about the changes and the places that the Democrats went that some people thought they might never get to.
Well, for example, we take the asylum process, and people can no longer just be released into the interior as part of that process. But what they get is the whole process is not 10 years long. It's literally a matter of months. So we take that process, we compress it down. People who still qualify for asylum, and it is a high bar, would get that answer in 6 months. But other folks don't get released into the interior for 10 years before they find out that they're denied and then have to leave.
What's the biggest thing that the Democrats gave up, quote, gave up in that compromise, in that debate, in that discussion?
Well, I think we recognized that we weren't going to get other things that we wanted done that are very important to me. For example, I wanted dreamers in that deal. I think people who have grown up here and know no other country, we should have them on a fast track to citizenship. And there should be a high bar for what we expect of them, but we should make dreamers citizens because they are an incredible asset to our country.
There are people who criticize the Democrats for being too late to this issue.
We were at this issue in 2013 when we actually passed immigration reform through the Senate. I think it was 68 votes. House Republicans refused to put it on the floor. We went back to the table in 2018, worked with Marco Rubio, tried to do it again. Stephen Miller, the immigration, I don't know what you call him, but he was the Trump's right-hand man on anti-immigration policy, killed that deal in 2018. It had massive funding for border security, and we were back at the table this year. It has been Republicans time and again who have walked away from actually solving this problem.
Let me give you an example, and we may disagree about this, but President Biden this summer passed an executive order saying, okay, we're going to go back to this rule in terms of asylum. If you come here illegally, you're no longer eligible for asylum, right?
Right.
So if you enter illegally. Almost immediately, you had a precipitous drop in the number of people crossing into the United States illegally. It made the issue on the border much more manageable.
Right.
That was something he didn't pass 3 years ago. He didn't inject 3 years ago, right? It feels late in the game to be saying, hey, we need to do this.
I supported what the president did. I don't know if it'll be durable in the courts, and that's why we need to change the laws that govern these systems.
What's the most important thing we can do to secure the border?
The most important thing we can do is really address the challenges we have in our asylum system. Because so many of these folks are showing up actually at ports of entry. They're not crossing in between. They're actually showing up and saying, I want asylum. We also need to address fentanyl, and that means we need to fund the things that find fentanyl when it's coming into the United States.
And almost all of the fentanyl is coming in through border checkpoints as well.
Not only through border checkpoints, but most of it's being carried by American citizens. We need the scanning technology to be able to find that stuff. It's why I helped secure $400 million specifically to finance those truck scanners and those pedestrian and passenger vehicle scanners that actually find the fentanyl.
Senator, let me ask you, and shift gears here. After inflation, crime is one of the most important issues to New Mexicans. Tell us what you have done at the federal level as a two-term senator.
You bet.
To make people safer.
First off, pass Fend Off Fentanyl. That is a law now, and it gives tools to law enforcement to be able to go after the bank accounts of the cartels who's been moving fentanyl into the United States. Secondly, I passed major gun crime legislation as part of the bipartisan gun bill that was passed 2 years ago. We went after gun trafficking, and we went after straw purchases. So straw purchases is where someone like myself, who can legally own a firearm, goes into a gun shop and buys it for a felon or a domestic abuser, gives them that gun, and then they use it in the crime. That used to be a paperwork crime. The legislation that I helped write now makes that a prosecutable, do hard time crime.
If I may, we have done a story, I want to say within the last year, of a woman who was accused of buying 10 handguns at a time. She has no criminal history, so there's nothing wrong, there's nothing illegal with her buying those weapons.
Until she transfers
handing them to her teenage son. He goes off and sells them, makes money, makes cash on these things, and only comes back to his mother after he sold 10 guns onto the street to people who have no good intentions for them. And she buys another 10 guns. So the law sounds fine, but I don't, sometimes in the newsroom you cover these stories and you say to yourself, well, where's the enforcement? Well, I mean, if there's a law in the books that you can't do that, you can't be a straw purchaser. And this is something, Senator, with respect, we find out after the fact. We find out after the fact that you've got 10 guns that were used in crimes, and they say, oh, it turns out all of these guns come back to this person. It seems like this is upside down.
It is upside down right now because we have, as a country, not addressed our gun crime problem for 30 years. We're just now putting the laws on the books to give DAs and U.S. attorneys and other prosecutors the ability to go successfully after people who commit those crimes, straw purchases, gun trafficking as well. We always assumed that gun trafficking was a problem where guns would be coming into the United States. So we wrote our laws that way. Now we've changed the law to say when you traffic firearms to Mexico, to Central America, those firearms end up in the hands of cartels. That in itself is a federal crime. And so we have to adjust the law, but we also have to have prosecutors who are going after those individuals and making real examples out of them.
Would you believe me if I told you that's not happening? I mean, the example I'm telling you didn't come before this law. I mean, it wasn't legal to do what this woman was doing when she did it. Right? It was illegal then. It was just something that no one seems to be paying attention to.
We are awash in handguns right now, and I think we really need to focus on prosecution because we're starting to build the muscle memory of the laws that can hold people accountable, but it's still someone's job to hold those people accountable.
I was speaking to, and this is exactly on this topic, I was speaking to Raul Bujanda, who's the head of the FBI here in New Mexico. Here's an experienced lawman, and I said, Raul, tell me, what do you think is the biggest driver of crime in our state? And I offered some possibilities. There's bail reform, there's policing, there's all sorts of things. And he just laughed at me. He sort of shrugged his shoulders and he said, Dean, there's too many guns.
There's too many guns, there's too many narcotics.
Everyone has a gun. Every teenage delinquent who wants a gun has a gun. And every criminal who, whether they're a teenager or not, if they want a gun, has a gun. As you mentioned, we're awash in guns. We have more guns, and I think we passed this recently, more guns in the country than we have people now. How do you solve this problem? It seems intractable in the sense that
you can't do it
washing
immediately.
these weapons
but
now.
This is part of an agenda that for 30 years, the NRA and groups to the right of the NRA said we want no rules. We want a permissive environment for firearms. We have to start taking control of our own destiny and passing laws that hold people accountable, but then actually having law enforcement and prosecutors do the hard work of holding those people accountable.
On that topic, what do you say to New Mexicans, and we have plenty of them who own guns, care about guns?
I own plenty of guns.
Are concerned about their Second Amendment rights. What do you say to those voters?
I think there is an obvious path forward here where you You protect people's ability to use firearms in a traditional way. I'm a hunter. I recreate with guns. I own some guns for home protection. All of that can be protected, and we can still say you shouldn't have a 30-round magazine on your AR-15 that allows you to walk into a movie theater and kill dozens of people before anyone can do anything about it.
That speaks to the larger sort of mass shootings, but it seems to me that there are far more people dying in our streets from just the bad guy with a handgun. That happens every day, all the time.
You know, I think we need to end this culture of permissiveness where everybody thinks they should own a handgun all the time. You know, if you own a car, you have to meet certain requirements to be able to drive the car, to have insurance. You have a responsibility if you own a firearm, and I think the law should recognize that there should be limits and boundaries and responsibility.
I'd like to shift now to a different topic that's always on the periphery, but I think it's very rarely at the center of any political campaign, and that is the federal debt, the federal deficit spending. In fiscal 24, I think we spent $1.5 trillion more dollars than we brought in. The federal debt, I think, is $35 trillion, somewhere maybe upwards of that number now. It's more than 100% of GDP and has been for a while.
Yep.
There are serious economists who believe that this is not sustainable, that we're on a path that is ruinous in terms of our economic future. And we're talking about the future of younger people, too, coming up, who are going to be saddled with this debt. Your thoughts on deficit spending and the debt?
Well, if you look back in time at when that exploded to an unmanageable level, you can tie the lion's share of it to the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts did not benefit average New Mexicans. They didn't even benefit, you know, moderately wealthy New Mexicans. They were so concentrated in the upper 10% that, in my view, one of the healthiest things that we can do long term to make our spending sustainable would be to let those Trump tax cuts expire.
Beyond that?
Beyond that, there are things that we should do within programs like Medicare and Medicaid to bend the cost curves in Social Security. There are many things that in an exchange, in a negotiated exchange, I could settle for. I don't think somebody who's, you know, making several million a year necessarily needs Social Security. We could means test that. You know, that wouldn't be my proposal, but I'd be open to that if we could roll back some of these tax cuts that have just exploded the deficit.
How urgent is this problem to you?
I think we're approaching a time. I don't think it is a problem that we can't solve, but it's going to take both sides getting together and saying we're willing to do things that our side doesn't like, and we need to do that sooner rather than later.
You pride yourself as a senator for, I think what's called bringing home the bacon. You fight for the labs. I mean, we have Los Alamos National Laboratory, we have Sandia National Labs, we've got Kirtland, Holloman, Cannon Air Force bases. And you've fought hard, and as someone with some tenure now, are in a better position to do that. How do you reconcile? I mean, you're bringing home billions of dollars to New Mexico.
So the top lines in the appropriations process are the top lines. It's my job to make sure New Mexico does better per capita than my colleagues, and I will do that, and I have done that. It doesn't change the top line spending number that any individual subcommittee appropriations chair gets, but within those bills, I'm going to make sure that New Mexicans' needs are addressed. And we have doubled both the budget and the raw number of jobs at both our big national labs. And we've looked out for New Mexico's interests. New Mexico does an enormous amount of work for the national security of the nation, and I'm going to make sure that it continues to be able to do that work effectively.
How do you reconcile that with deficit spending?
Once again, if I didn't fight for our labs, if I didn't fight for our bases, it wouldn't change the top line number in any of those spending bills. So what I believe is it's my job to make sure that within whatever that top line spending bill is, that New Mexicans' needs get addressed.
I want to speak briefly about something, and there's some, just to be candid, this is some self-interest here. Broadcasters traditionally have always been responsible, and people in print media, newspaper people, responsible for what they broadcast or they print.
Yeah.
We've moved into an era where we have social media as is hugely successful, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in revenue. Some of that money has come out of the broadcasters and out of the pockets of print media. The social, and I don't think everyone necessarily understands this, that the social media players, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, they're not responsible for their content. Right?
And they're also not paying the actual providers of content. If they're scraping from a local paper or a local television station, there is no compensation to those entities either. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for them. They get they get the revenue, but they get none of the responsibility.
They get free content and none of the responsibility for that content. Congress is responsible for this. Congress passed the laws protecting them and giving them the right to say, well, we're just a billboard. We're just a
Section 230.
Yeah, people are just putting, they're just posting what they're posting.
I think it was a huge mistake.
How do we get back to something that's more sane?
There are a number of legislative proposals to do that, but it means that we actually have to take on those tech companies. And some of my colleagues are willing to do that. I'm willing to do that, but not all of them are willing to do that. And so we're trying to build a coalition that gets us back to a healthier democracy and the kind of free press, for lack of a better phrase, that served our nation so well for over 200 years. And if we don't do that with AI, we're going to be in the same boat.
Okay. We're in a place where the country's probably never been more polarized, or maybe it's never felt this polarized anyway. How do we get back to having a discussion between people on the right and the left and feeling like we have some common ground?
I think the most important thing is to listen and to recognize that when we are embracing and tolerant of each other, even with our differences. We can disagree on whatever. We have to be able to work together and produce outcomes. And if we don't do that, we're just giving a huge leg up, a huge advantage to our competitors in the world, to the Russias and the Chinas and the Irans.
Structurally, where do you think this polarizing atmosphere that we find ourselves in, where does it come from?
It's from people consuming information through a soda straw instead of with a wider lens. There are so many people who are getting their news not from a local television station, not from a local paper, not from the sort of historical sources, but from someone's blog that is disconnected from reality. And it creates a very fractionated information environment. People are socially not interacting as much as any of us would like. I mean, there's a huge social value to a thing like a front porch, knowing your neighbor. I don't care if your neighbor has a different political sticker on the back of his truck than you do. Treat him with respect. We are stronger as a country when we realize we're all in this together.
Senator, we're almost out of time. I'd like to lighten this a little bit. We're coming to this perfect time in New Mexico where the summer heat is fading. What is your favorite time of year in New Mexico? And maybe a memory from that period or something about it that you find joy in.
Elk season.
Explain this.
And it's usually, I didn't get a tag this year. A lot of New Mexicans can relate to that. Yeah. But
I didn't either, by the way.
My best memories are of like September or October, up in the Aspens, hunting with one of my sons, cold nights, campfires, everything that comes with being on public lands outside in the fall in New Mexico is pretty much perfect.
All right. Any last thought about New Mexico you'd like to share?
So I've got a pretty good recipe for elk carne adobada, but you'll have to catch me at the grocery store or the county fair and I'll share it.
All right. Senator, we thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Nella Domenici has one of the most recognizable last names in New Mexico politics. Her dad, the late Pete Domenici, was one of the longest-serving New Mexico senators. Nella Domenici was born in Albuquerque. She earned a bachelor's degree and law degree from Georgetown University and a graduate degree from the Harvard Business School.
With Nella's dad serving our state, her mom had her hands full. Nella saw firsthand those values are timeless.
Domenici has worked in the finance industry as the chief financial officer for Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. She also held senior positions at Citadel and Credit Suisse First Boston. Domenici is a mother of 2, stepmom of 4, and the wife of a Navy veteran.
Ms. Domenici, I want to thank you very much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
We really appreciate getting to visit with you. I want to start right away with an issue that New Mexicans care a great deal about, and that is inflation. We have people in this state who are struggling to pay rent, struggling to buy groceries. Your thoughts on inflation?
So I translate it to cost of living, because really it's the cost of living has gone up so much here in New Mexico. And sadly, when all of these items go up in price, it hurts New Mexicans more than almost any other state. So the reason for that is the average family income in New Mexico is, depending on the year, it's in the bottom 5 or the bottom 6 or the bottom 7. So the average family in New Mexico has a relatively low income, and it's relatively fixed. We also have 18% of our population lives below the poverty line. So for many, many New Mexicans, when the price of food and the price of gasoline goes way up, 20, 30%, which is what we've seen, they do not have the flexibility in their budget to cover that. But the ironic and really sad and disappointing part about it is our own federal legislators drove this inflation, because inflation is caused by many factors, but one of the biggest factors is just excess spending by the government. And so we know in the last several years, our government really, with Martin Heinrich representing our state as the most senior legislator, they've supported and created massive spending programs, which drove the inflation, which then comes back here and hurts the average New Mexican. But there's another factor about this inflation which is even equally ironic, which is inflation is also caused when the price of energy goes up. And if you could make energy more abundant, it can bring the price of energy down and the cost of living down. And we are sitting on top of the Permian Basin, but we're really sitting on top of the Delaware Basin, which is a sub-basin. This is the best basin in America for oil, and it's not being utilized well. It's not being levered well. Also because our radical progressive leaders, Martin Heinrich, Ben Ray Lujan, MLG, are doing everything they can to make it hard for that oil and gas to be drilled here right beneath our state.
I want to speak in broader terms. Talking about inflation, we're talking about people who have trouble paying rent, trouble buying groceries, but there's also, over the last decades, you have the issue of productivity seeing enormous gains over decades, right? Just amazing numbers over time. And workers today, especially people on the lower end of the income spectrum, don't have any more buying power than they did 20 years ago. How do you put more money back in the pockets of these people?
So first of all, the average wage in New Mexico has really not gone up commensurate with the cost of living increases. So you're asking, how do we help the average New Mexican make more money so that it can catch up with the cost of living? Is that correct?
Absolutely. How do you put more buying power back in the hands of workers?
So you can either bring the cost of goods back down, or you can take your workers and hopefully put them in all sorts of different education programs where they learn new skills so that they can leverage those new, more valuable skills in the workforce. But you also need companies then to come here who want those more sophisticated skills, so that it's a complicated process. It's not something that can be solved overnight.
Let me ask you a more direct question. Do you know the federal minimum wage right now?
Well, it's very low, something like $7 or something.
Just over 7. I think it's $7.25 an hour. Your thoughts on that minimum wage?
So minimum wage is a complicated thing because right now we also have, sadly, a huge influx of illegal immigrants and coming over our border. That's also due to an administration and a set of leaders like Martin Heinrich who are allowing this surge of labor to come into our country. Those people are willing to work for low wages. So we need to be very careful when we set minimum wage that we don't actually take jobs away from some of our people. And we also need to make sure we don't push the cost of labor up into places like restaurants and grocery stores and all of these basic and gardening and make labor so high that those companies then become non-competitive. So I think $7 is very, very low, but when you talk about minimum wage, you have to understand, are we going to create jobs or lose jobs? And can companies absorb this, or will it cause companies to actually have difficulty running? And right now, that's a big problem for many companies. labor has gone up in many areas, and that's pushing the price of things up. And if companies don't raise their prices, they're losing profits.
Do you think companies are paying too much these days, corporations?
I mean, that's a very generalized question. I would.
It's based on your statement. I mean, you're talking about the cost for a business.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a free market. It's an efficient market, and companies have been paying more and more for labor, and that's what the market bears, and that's what they should be doing.
Okay. I
would never mandate to companies and assume that we have very efficient markets. If you have competitive markets and you have good transparency so everyone knows what's going on and there's honesty, and we have that because of our SEC rules, then you know you have an efficient market and companies pay what they need to pay.
You have lived much of your life on the East Coast. You have not been a real presence in New Mexico until recent years. Tell us why you want to be the U.S. Senator from New Mexico.
Can I correct your statement or just flesh out that statement? So you said I haven't been a real presence until recently. So first of all, the only reason we left New Mexico, and I was living near you when I had to move, was because my father was elected to be United States Senator. And many people would say he's the most profound United States Senator we've had in this country. So I lived in Washington with my father because he was representing this state. So this state has always been my home, and it's always meant the world to my entire family.
Okay.
But it's not as though I disappeared at all. I have, just like my father, woven in a life that involved coming back to New Mexico. And I want to give you 2 or 3 examples because I don't think it's fair that people don't understand this. So for example, I actually had a consulting business with my father for a couple of years, about 12 years ago. We advised an Albuquerque company called Rio Grande Jewelers on how it could get capital to grow. So Rio Grande Jewelers it's a blue chip Albuquerque company, this incredible company with 1,000 employees, and it was run by a family. And they needed a new investor to come in so they could transition. And my father and I, in our consulting business, advised them on how to do that. And we brought Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett here, to be their investor. That's the first time Berkshire Hathaway invested here. So that's an example of something I did, I don't know the exact year, about 12 years ago. Similarly, this is very important, and our viewers need to know this. The biggest problem facing New Mexico is education, unequivocally. Crime is probably tied for it, and no one's really cracked out. We've had all these governors who failed to solve the problem, and MLG has done a terrible job. About 7 years ago, my husband and I, 7 years ago, started something called Excellent Schools of New Mexico. It's a charter school organization, and everyone thought we couldn't do it, that we couldn't help the students in the poorest areas by bringing in charter schools. And we said, we don't care what other people think, we're going to try. And now this charter school organization called Excellent Schools of New Mexico, which only serves students in the poorest areas, has 13 schools and 9,000 students who are all doing extraordinarily well.
And my understanding is that those charter schools also aren't just anywhere in New Mexico, but are in many of the most underserved areas. Okay. I want to get back to the question, though. I'm asking you, and I asked you, why do you want to be the U.S. Senator from New Mexico?
So I want to be the U.S. Senator from New Mexico now because I've always wanted to serve this state. I've always wanted to bring my networks, my skills, my contacts to bear on helping New Mexico grow and flourish. And I chose to do it now because New Mexico's in a crisis. The problems in this state are so profound, and they're causing us, just one problem is piling on top of the next problem, right? Our huge crime problem scares employers from coming here. Our education problem scares employers from coming here. It scares people from moving here. Both of those problems are causing people to leave here. So we're in this terrible downward spiral, and I would like to bring my skills to bear to help New Mexico really. I'd say New Mexico's at the bottom of its V, and I'd like to help New Mexico get all of its wonderful aspects, unite them, and solve our problems, and have New Mexico be the great state it can be.
I have a question. I'd like to shift a little bit here, and a confession for you. I'm not really comfortable talking about money, especially other people's money.
Okay.
You have been incredibly successful as a businesswoman. According to campaign disclosures, you're worth on the order of somewhere between $20 and $100 million. you have multiple multi-million-dollar homes. Is that fair?
Yes.
So the question is, why should the people of New Mexico who are struggling to pay the rent trust you to understand what they're going through, given that amount of wealth insulates you from many day-to-day problems? So why should they trust you to understand that problem and to solve it?
So first of all, that amount of wealth doesn't insulate you from understanding problems. What insulates someone from understanding problems is their attitude. And so I just want you to know, for example, we all know crime is a big problem here, right? But I wasn't sure I understood it well enough, and I still don't know if I understand it well enough. So about 2 weeks ago, I spent 6 hours with a sergeant in Albuquerque Police Department, driving around with him on his normal shift. And I insisted that we find a sergeant whose normal shift was focused on the international zone, or the war zone. So I wanted to go to the worst area in Albuquerque and see what it's really like so I could understand crime better. So understanding issues is a function of your attitude. It's not a function of your individual professional accomplishments.
All right, let me shift.
But I do think that this state needs businesses. It needs jobs. And those people, we've talked now about jobs, higher paying jobs, people who can't pay their rent. A lot of the issues facing the state now are how do we have more good jobs here with good benefits and good salaries. And I understand how to create, build, and grow jobs. That's my whole life's cause, a businesswoman.
Okay, I'd like to shift now to the issue of abortion. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's an issue that matters a great deal to women all across the country and here in New Mexico. For the record, your position on a woman's right or not to abortion?
So first of all, you should know, and the audience should know, that I have spent a great deal of my life, and it's been a key driver to be a role model, a champion, an advocate to empower women. And that commitment to that started when I was very young.
Ms. Domenici, I'm asking you about, with respect, I'm trying to get to a lot of topics, and I'm asking you specifically, it's a fairly straightforward question, your position on the right to abortion.
So I think abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, and most importantly, rare. I will not support a federal ban on abortion.
Do you believe it is a fundamental right for women?
The right to choose whether or not they should have an abortion? Mm-hmm. Yes.
A fundamental right. So given that, my question is, if you are elected to the U.S. Senate, will you then in the U.S. Senate not just oppose a national ban, but will you work toward a federal protection of the right to have an abortion at the federal level?
So my position on abortion is I will not support a federal ban. I respect the decision the Supreme Court made recently to push abortion down to the state level. And New Mexico at the state level has decided on its policy, and I will abide by that policy. But I've done a lot of work in this area, and I think that our country and our state and all of our communities have overlooked the most important area where to focus on. I think the focus should be on preventing unintended pregnancies. So let me make sure you know this and the audience knows this. Unintended pregnancies, out of every 3 unintended pregnancies, 1 results in an abortion. And right now in this country we have, plus or minus, it's very hard to know exactly, 3 million unintended pregnancies. And if you read up how many abortions do we have a year, it's about 1. So those 3 million unintended pregnancies are causing 1 million abortions a year. We don't need to have 3 million unintended pregnancies. We need, as a country, to focus on better birth control. We need to trust women. We need to educate them on birth control. We need to make sure that their choice of the best birth control is available both financially and literally. So as a responsible woman who cares about other women and trusts and wants to empower them, I want to shift the focus to where it really should be. It should be on birth control, where we're educating and empowering, so we reduce unintended pregnancies.
With respect, I don't think it's a revelation for voters that abortions come from unintended pregnancies. I don't think that's a revelation. I'm asking if you're in the U.S. Senate as a senator from New Mexico, if you feel this is a fundamental right for women, if you will support, if you will commit to fighting for a national protection of that right. The same way that you wouldn't say, well, people in Texas don't have freedom of speech because Texas has decided that doesn't matter. If you believe it's a fundamental right,
as I've said,
I'm asking you, it follows whether or not at the federal level you will support that.
I respect the Supreme Court's recent decision to push the issue down to the states, and I will abide by New Mexico's position as a federal senator.
But you aren't just dealing with New Mexico policy. I mean, the interesting thing about what we have in New Mexico is that we had state legislators who protected the right to abortion in this state, as you, I'm sure, know, taking a law from the 50s that made abortion illegal in our state that was sitting up on the shelf and it wasn't being enforced only because of Roe v. Wade, and they had the foresight, because that was an issue they cared about. I'm not saying it's the proper position, but if you care about abortion rights, to get rid of that law before Roe v. Wade was overturned. So that's the reason it's protected here, because that law was taken off the books by Democrats at the State House. If you are a U.S. Senator, you're involved in a much bigger question. Let me be more direct. If you're a U.S. Senator and you have Supreme Court justices who are nominated to the Supreme Court, you have judges who are nominated who do not support the right to abortion, they don't believe it's a given right, would you oppose those justices?
I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions right now on that. I've told you my position.
You may say it's a hypothetical, but this comes up all the time.
I've told you my position perfectly clearly, which I will not support a federal ban on abortion. I respect the Supreme Court's decision to push it down to the states, and our state has decided on its policy, and I will abide by that.
And for the record, you will not tell us then in the Senate how you would behave relative to Supreme Court nominees.
You just asked me my opinion on abortion.
And you say you won't. And you won't say you won't tell us. Okay. You're running in this race as a Republican. The head of your party championed overturning Roe v. Wade. I mean, he courted while he was running for president. I'm talking about Donald Trump now. Evangelicals, other people who are against abortion, and said, I'll get Roe v. Wade overturned. He installed Supreme Court justices who did that. He celebrated afterwards. He said, I delivered for you. How is it that you're so far apart from the leadership of your party on this issue?
So I'm a very independent thinker, and I will be a very independent thinker. And you can look at your own party. I mean, you have people like Bill Sanders and Joe Manchin. I don't know if you're a Democrat, but you can look at the other party. There's a wide range of positions on any single issue. And that's how both parties operate. And you have people like Bill Sanders, who's very independent, and Bernie Sanders, and you have people like Joe Manchin, and they're miles apart, and that's perfectly acceptable. And I've always been a very independent thinker, and I'll use my independent thinking to fight for New Mexicans, and that's what New Mexicans deserve. They don't need someone who's attached to one person and one person's entire portfolio of views on every single issue.
Understood, understood. You have not said whether you would vote for Donald Trump. You said that earlier in your campaign. Is that still your position? That you won't say who you're supporting?
So right now, you know, I'm sure you see it here on the news. The murders in this city in the last month have been horrible, and we're already the worst state for crime in the country. I want to focus on the real issues that are very, very urgent and large in magnitude. And so we need to focus on crime. We need to focus on all the people. Every day we wake up here and we say, did one person die by homicide or did 3 die by homicide? Those are the issues we need to be focusing on. We need to focus on fentanyl. Do you know how many people are dying of fentanyl in this city, in this state, every single year? I want to make sure, and New Mexicans deserve this, that the problems that are most pressing, I'm around this state hands-on every day, all day. And I know what people care about. They tell me, they come to me, they find me. And these are the issues we need to be focused on.
We talk about big issues. Are you saying it's not a big issue whether Donald Trump gets elected or Kamala Harris? I mean, you're talking about big issues. I give you that. Crime is a big issue. Fentanyl is a big issue. The presidential election actually matters to a number of people, right? I mean, so I think it's a fair question. If you care about big issues, people want to know where you stand on this particular issue. I don't think it's an unfair question to say, do you support Donald Trump in this election?
So I want to talk about the issues you brought up, cost of living.
But why don't you want to talk about the head of your party, I guess is my question, and why you won't even say whether you support him or not?
Because I think it's important for New Mexicans that we focus on, they are more pressing issues, and my race is a very pressing race. My race is huge. Martin Heinrich has been a senator for 12 years, and this state has gotten worse and worse and worse every single year. And you haven't even asked me about him yet. And
I'm still trying, with respect, I'm still trying to get an answer about some other things.
He's failed.
That I'm not hearing answers to.
He's failed this state, and I'm running against him. Yeah. This is a race for United States Senator. This is a race against one of the most radical progressives who cares extremely, extremely about narrow, radical issues. He voted many, many times on all sorts of things to leave this border open, to make it easy to come through, to make people have easy benefits when they get over here, to give all sorts of rights to these people. He enabled this border crisis in our state.
Okay, and we'll talk about the border. I just want to ask you one last time. Do the people, the Senate is a powerful position. It's one of the most powerful political positions in our country. Do the people who are voting for you, New Mexicans, not deserve to know where you stand on Donald Trump?
The people who are voting for me need to know where I stand on the policies that are most important to them, and they need to know how I will go to bat for them on those policies.
And you think they're unrelated to who wins the presidency?
And they need to know, and you need to know, there are many, many policies where Martin Heinrich has failed them. Why do you think we have such high crime here? There's many federal areas that he has completely failed in, and we need to talk about those now.
Well, let's talk about the border. You brought up the border.
Let's talk about the border, where
What do you think is the most important issue on the border, and what would you do as a senator to solve? I mean, I'm assuming we agree that we have a problem on the border. You have a border that's not been secured, that is out of control with fentanyl and also with immigrants at a level that's unsustainable. How do you solve this problem?
So can we just finish the sentence that you're saying?
Please.
So I agree that we have this huge problem with the border, a wide open border with terrorists coming through, people from all sorts of countries coming through, many of whom are wonderful people, but many of whom have criminal backgrounds. We also have a wide open border where lots and lots of fentanyl is coming through. Those problems are the responsibility, and they need to be tagged to the leaders who created those problems. And Martin Heinrich created those problems. He said we should not complete putting up a border wall. He said putting up a border wall would be visually unappealing. It would be not a nice thing to see. Meanwhile, and he denied the funding to build that wall. Meanwhile, if you go up there, I'm sure you've been there, our wall is half built and it's half open, the other side of our border, but all the supplies we need to build that wall are right there. It just got froze. So yes, let's talk about how to fix the border problem.
I'm still asking, what would you do? I'm asking what you would do specifically.
Let's acknowledge who hasn't done anything right for the last 10 years.
But I think the voters are interested in your solutions.
Exactly. So here, let's run through them real quickly. Okay?
Please.
So first of all, the wall, in some shape or form, either using state-of-the-art technology or materials, needs to be put up so that we can actually have a border that functions in a secure, consistent, legal fashion. We need a lot more, and that's a federal issue. That's Martin Heinrich's issue. We need a lot more federal money for Border Patrol. There's woefully inadequate Border Patrol over there. Our asylum standards they're now a sham. The entire asylum process is a sham. It's been created that way. We need to go refine and narrow our asylum matters, and we need to put more federal money into making sure that process is faster. And we need to insist that people wait in Mexico so it doesn't just become a game where they know they come here, they get released, and they're never planning on coming back.
I'd like to get into some specifics. So remain in Mexico is something you support. That's okay. I hear specific there. Let me ask you, do you support the current, and this is a presidential executive order that says if you come here illegally, you're not eligible for asylum? And that, by the way, was not President Biden. I mean, that's his executive order, but it had been done before him as well. Your thoughts on that particular?
So can you just repeat the question?
I'm sorry. So there's an executive order in place that was passed this summer when the congressional deal on the border fell apart that said, okay, from now on, if you come to the border and you come into our country illegally, you can't apply for asylum. And that dropped the number immediately and radically. You support something like that, I take it.
So first of all, we need a comprehensive package, and we should not be, and all of these decisions should be approved by the Senate and the House and the executive office. We should reduce the number of these executive orders that are getting, and these band-aids that are getting thrown out there. That's not a way to manage immigration. So as soon as the election's over, that needs to be done.
Okay.
Conceptually, conceptually, we do not want policies in place that just incent people to repeat the same thing. So by telling people, if you come here illegally, you cannot submit for asylum later, sends a good signal. But conceptually, we need to, that's an executive order. We need to reduce these executive orders and have a comprehensive package that's approved by the House and Senate in a bipartisan way.
I apologize for cutting out. We're almost out of time, and I'd like to lighten this just a little bit. Your father was a longtime senator from New Mexico. He was very well respected, and I think people forget, not only was he a moderate in terms of being able to work across the aisle, but also he was someone who cared about the budget. He would cajole both sides to come together on sensible budgets. What do you think your father would say about you running?
So my father, it's actually completely the opposite.
And we only have about a minute, so I need you to be brief.
So you brought up my career. My career has been in finance. My career has been in budgets. And I probably gravitated to that because that's what my role model did. My father would be so proud. He was awestruck by my skills. He would be so proud that I was volunteering those skills to this state and this country. He would be thrilled.
Okay. I want to sneak another one in. Your favorite time of the year in New Mexico, and any sort of connection to that time, the period of the year?
So for me, I've always been involved in the International Folk Art Market in Santa Fe, which is right after July 4th. And there are artists from all around the world come from very, very poor communities, and they sell their art, and they make more money in that weekend than they do in the whole year. And many of them stay at my home. And I have many volunteers from Santa Fe around my home. So it's this wonderful experience, and most of them are women. It's this wonderful experience of women helping women around the world use their art and culture to help develop economic advantages for their communities at home.
That's a sweet memory.
It is.
Ms. Domenici, we're out of time.
Thank you.
I thank you so much for visiting with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll
Great
see you
to
again.
See you. Okay, all right.
Voting begins next month. In-person absentee voting for the 2024 general election begins Tuesday, October 8th. Voters may begin casting their absentee ballots in person at the clerk's annex from October 8th through October 18th. If you mail your absentee ballot, it is due by 7 p.m. to your county clerk's office on Election Day. Early voting begins Saturday, October 19th. It will run through November 2nd. Check your county clerk's page for early voting locations. If you have questions about the election, you can go to KRQE.com to get them answered. Our local election headquarters page has voting information, candidate profiles, and all the issues involving candidates you are concerned about. We'll have the latest information through Election Day on November 5th.
Thanks for watching this KRQE News 13 special. Keep it here on KRQE and, of course, KRQE.com for the very latest information on all of the major races as we head toward Election Day.
Tune in to us on Election Night for all the latest results and live reports from candidate campaign headquarters. Good night.